just go answer?
Yeah. Yeah.
I am going to answer the question how I came to be a UU minister. So, I am a preacher's kid. My father's a Unitarian Universalist minister, and in fact, his father was a liberal religious minister. So I was raised in a family in which religion was something people did. When I was a kid, that had the effect that I thought religion or ministry was the last thing I would want to do. And so throughout my teens, I certainly tried hard to distance myself as far as possible from my father and grandfather and so forth. But when I was 18, I was born in Germany. And when I was 18, I was living in Germany, and in Germany at that time, it was customary for 18-year-old boys to have military service, a draft. But we had the option of applying to become a CO, a conscientious objector. And that was something that I attempted to do. And as part of that application, I had to write an essay on why I thought I could not be a part of the military or couldn't kill. And as I did that, trying to articulate my beliefs at that age, I stumbled upon my family background and things I'd heard, and I started to think about the values in my family in a way I'd not thought about them before, and began to realize that they, in fact, were something that I embraced. And so it was in that CO application essay that I wrote that I said, well, yeah, I actually think highly of the ministry and my father and my grandfather, and, well, my grandfather actually more than my father. It's easier to skip a generation when I still felt a distinct need to distance myself from my father at that time. But I did realize that I was interested in theology and religion and that it was meaningful to me, and so I started off on a hunch, and I was it was always a hate-love kind of a back and forth as to whether it was a good thing, and the longer I stayed with it, the more deeply I came to understand that it was the right thing for me, and now I've been at it for 25 years or so, and I'm pretty darn sure I want to be a minister when I grow up. So it's from my family, something that I've kind of worked towards at one point rejecting, and the older I get, to embracing more and more fully. So, yeah.
And I, too, was raised a Unitarian Universalist, though not a preacher's kid, but my mother was a director of religious education. So I'm a DRE kid and grew up in the First Unitarian Church of Pittsburgh and was very involved, attended church school throughout. I was, where's Ray? Is Ray in here? At the time, before OWL, they taught AYS. I don't know if you remember that. That was about your sexuality. And I always used to joke that I took it twice, because I took it, well, because I took it in 7th grade, and then they offered it again my senior year. And so if you have any questions, no, I'm just, no, it was a great experience growing up in the church. And I was also involved in a college group then. I was at the University of Pittsburgh, and there were about 3 or 4 of us. I mean, it was not a large, very active college group, but nevertheless, it was important to me, and I was an organizing part of that. And then, and I majored in anthropology and sociology, double major for, great career potential. Okay, not right. So, I graduated and worked for Pittsburgh National Bank as a bank teller, and I was working at the bank and attending church on Sundays, and I had been thinking about applying to graduate school, but the application had been sort of lying on my desk, and I just didn't do anything about it, But I knew I didn't want to stay as a bank teller forever. And I was in church one Sunday listening to the minister, it was the Reverend Paul Beatty. And all of a sudden I thought, betcha he went to school to learn how to do that. And I thought, being in Pittsburgh, we didn't have a lot of interns, or we weren't near any kind of the UU theological school, so that was kind of a new idea for me. And I asked my mother, she said, well, let's go look in the UUA directory. And so we got one out of the office, church office, and it said there were 3 UU theological schools at the time that were listed in the UUA directory. Harvard Divinity School in Boston, Meadville Lombard in Chicago, and Star King in Berkeley, California. And I'm like, I'm going to Berkeley. And well, I wasn't sure I was going to Berkeley, but I thought that seemed the most attractive. And having grown up in Pittsburgh. And so I applied and was accepted. And I wasn't sure at the time. I think I was 22. So I wasn't completely sure that I was ready to be a minister, but I thought I was really ready to learn to see if that was something I could perhaps become. And so Stark King was a wonderful experience for me. I learned so much about I learned some about UUism and religion, but I learned a whole lot about myself. And I also met Axel, which was a wonderful thing. And at the time, it's funny, we were the only 2 students of the whole student body at the time under the age of 30. So everyone else which was fine, but it did sort of bring us together. And yeah, so that was it. And it's been a great ride. And I think if you've read my bio, you'll know that Axel and I did co-ministry for 10 years. And then my sort of calling went towards another form of ministry, I thought. And I went to law school and was really trying to pursue some other ways of kind of carrying out social justice. And, I'm so glad I went to law school, even though I had a friend that warned me. She says, you probably won't be a lawyer for very long. And I go, all right. But law school was great, and I really liked my brief stint as a lawyer. But I'm truly called, I think, to be a Unitarian Universalist minister. And I'm glad for all that I've learned along the way. But coming back to the ministry this past year, I've been serving a small fellowship in Decatur, Illinois. And it's just been great. And coming back to do co-ministry with Axel again sort of feels like I've come full circle. And to do it here would just be the fullest of circles. And so just, yeah, that's how I came here. So, yeah.
Okay.
Molly's,
Let me act as the moderator here. So the idea is that, if you've got something you'd like to ask them, you can direct it to both of them, or you could direct it to one or the other of them. If you'd say your name so that they begin to get to know some of us, that would be great. So Helene.
Hi, I'm Helene, and this is sort of a twofold, and I don't care who answers it, both of you, whatever. What are your strengths as a minister, and how does your co-minister complement with an E, complement you?
Good.
Well, what the strengths are? Of course, everything. No. So I think I'm, especially humility, Elaine is saying. Yes, I'm the most humble of the two of us, I think. So who would have thunk it? I think I really like preaching and sermon and worship. It has come to be a very important part of ministry for me. Because I say who would have thunk it, because early on it was also the most difficult and the most sort of gut-wrenching process. Saturday nights is always a dark night of the soul for ministers. Apart from that, I'm really drawn to the traditional roles of a parish minister. The counseling, the visiting folks, that are ill, rites of passage, classes. I actually really like committee meetings. Some people, okay, I'm not saying you need to like committee meetings. I like committee meetings. So, yes. And how we complement one another. Elaine shares these skills as well. Her passions are a little bit more, I would say. Why don't you say what your passions are?
I think Axel and I both have a lot of similar strengths and skills, but also sort of personality type we're different, and that I think helps us complement one another. Axel is a very deep thinker, and he reads many books and spends much time thinking deep thoughts, and it shows then. It comes out in various ways, and you'll see that. I have some deep thoughts too, but generally I tend to be more outgoing, and I don't spend much time alone in my room. I really like to be out in the world, and I do have a real passion for social justice. Axel does as well, but he'll more preach about it or be involved in a more slightly removed way, and I very much like to be out and involved in the community and carrying that out. And I would quote something that several people have heard already, but Dan Hotchkiss was a ministerial settlement director way back in the day, and one thing he told to us early on when we were first doing co-ministry was that it was really important to be complementary and not compensatory. So, meaning that we don't need to compensate for one another. We both need to be skillful in all kind of regular church areas, because most of the time you'll have one or the other of us in front of you, and so we both need to be able to carry out all those regular ministerial tasks. But being co-ministers really allows us to go a little bit further afield in each of our directions, I think, and to specialize a little bit more. So I'm happy to be able to do more of kind of the social outreach, and Axel's happy to do more of the deep thinking. So, okay, good.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ken Cuneo, and I think most of people who've been watching the news regularly over weeks, there's a pattern there. You could see a man of color being shot weekly. You could see refugees from every possible place in the world being displaced and in terrible condition, and you see unrest in our cities. And I use that as a frame to discuss how can we, a very small church when compared to other denominations, how can we enlarge to where we can become a force to counter the terror and the bad stuff that has become the norm. When you see the news, you could just about predict what you're going to be seeing. And we have a city of 100,000, just 17 miles away. How do we attract those individuals to become members of it?
Okay, thank you, Ken.
Okay, well, so I heard that sort of a bit as a two-parter. So the first, I do think that the news, I mean, you turn on the news and there's great unrest in the world, and there is many issues we need to address. I tend to think that almost any size group can start to do something to address those things, certainly to become more informed, I think, and to find ways to come together and talk about those issues and keep sort of, one of my heroes, Jesse, keep hope alive. I think we need to, I think bringing our religious perspective to those issues can be very helpful. I also think, my personal belief is showing up. Showing up is a huge thing, and it doesn't take many people, and I hope a lot of you have been following. There's a number of our UU congregations across the country have been doing an awful lot of showing up. I mean, certainly all this standing on the side of love, but a lot of the Black Lives Matter, a lot of immigration rallies. I mean, there's a few people can make a big impact, I think, simply by showing up, because so many people don't. So many people stay home. And I also think the second part was more about attracting other folks, and that's a big issue, and there's a lot of discussion happening, again, in UU circles about what's, I think, is best described sort of as our cultural norms. We do have cultural norms in our congregations, though we often don't always see them as that, because there are they are sort of invisible to us, but I do think there's something, I heard once that the opposite of multicultural is monocultural, which I thought was very striking. And we don't like to think of ourselves as monocultural, but I think, and maybe we're not completely, but we could be more, and you have to be intentional about it, and you have to take a look at it and see. But I continue to think that Unitarian Universalism has a message that is crucial for our times, and that the more we are able to practice articulating it and talking about it and being out there, we can do a lot. So, did you want to add to that?
I mean, we could do a sermon series on this, though. I mean, we could talk all day about this, this kind of stuff. I mean, it's one of the big questions for sure. It's how do we make a difference in the world, given our religious convictions? Sometimes when I preach sermons on, for instance, race, anti-racism, and for sure it will, a big part of the sermon will be painting a very sort of a discouraging picture of the state of affairs and what needs to be done. And sometimes, of course, it's a sermon that ends on a hopeful note. Nevertheless, people then ask me after the sermon, well, what can we do? It's just so horrible. What can we do? The problems are so overwhelming. And lately I've come to think of it, well, actually the fact that, for instance, racism, though it's connected with all these other injustices that you speak of, all the isms out there, it is very pervasive. But that also means that basically, no matter where you are, you can start to make a difference. I mean, it's all over the place. That means wherever you are, you can start to push in the opposite direction. And again, because it's such a profound problem, I mean, it touches people on an economic level, on a personal level, a psychological level, a spiritual level, you name it. I mean, and again, you can engage it on all these different levels. Yes, you can go out to demonstrations, which I also like to come along to. But it does make a difference to read up on it, to look at the root causes, to look at the history, to imagine some of the theory to better understand cause and effects and how to make a difference. And it makes a difference to do spiritual work, a grounding, find some way to maintain a sense of hope in the midst of all this, these hard things, or a vision of what a better world would look like, And so there's a place for spiritual practice, and there's a place for discussion groups, and there's a place for learning how to have conversations with family members who might not share your views and how you can persuade them maybe that they should think about these things. So there's a lot to say, but our time is limited. Very good question.
Can I just add to that? It was really funny. So we did the traditional January Martin Luther King Sunday sermon on anti-racism. And so Axel did one year, and it was great sermon. And a church member came up to him afterwards and said, okay, that's all wonderful, and yeah, we do that once a year, but what can we do about it? So 2 weeks later, I preached a sermon listing 10 things we can do about it. I didn't hear another word. But all that's to say is I do think there's a lot that we can do, and sometimes posing the question as though we can't or feeling sort of helpless, I'd rather focus on the things we can do.
Okay, I saw Karen's hand up.
Hi there, welcome. So great to have you with us. I'm Karen Araujo, one of several Karens. Karens, Carols, and Janes abound. So if you're ever stuck for a name without a name tag, good guess. I have 2 questions. One is, some of us may be in the habit of referring to our clergy as pastor, Reverend Axel, Reverend Elaine, the Reverend Skirman. Have you a preference for or aversion to any terms that we may use when addressing you or speaking about you to others? And the second thing is, we use the worship associate model here, and speak on the blessings and concerns around that model. Thank you.
So I would prefer you call me Axel and her Elaine. That would just be, it help cut down on confusion. I usually think of myself as a minister. If people call me Reverend Axel, that's okay. I'll know I meant. But the congregation I've served up to this point, it's been Axel. That's been okay. Though when speaking with people outside the congregation, we might say minister or reverend, depending on what the context is. No aversions to being called reverend or minister or whatever, pastor, whatever helps people understand what it is we do. And of course, you always want to have in mind what their context is, where they're coming from, and so. Worship associates, I think it's a good thing. I mean, I was very impressed with what Ray did this morning. I think it really helped build the message, and I thought it was great that Elaine was able to get a copy of it a couple of days ahead of time so that she could then relate what she was doing in her sermon, tying it together. They were both working hard to show common themes, and as far as I'm concerned, that really strengthens the message, makes it more relevant for everyone. So I think it's a very good thing. I think it's a challenge. It takes some planning, it takes some discipline, but I think you've got a great tradition here of worship associates. It's a challenge for me because for most of my ministry I've not had worship associates, and so I've been a one-person worship preparer, except when Elaine and I do stuff together, then of course we'd approach it differently, but most services I've done alone, and that's a particular style. But I believe that I do, despite what some people might think, I do have the capacity to change. So And I think this would be a worthwhile change to work towards. I guess that makes a big difference. So. And then I've also been doing, so this year I've been starting up a Worship Associates program at the congregation in Urbana-Champaign, and it's been good. It's been very exciting. I felt very fortunate to have Elaine in my ministry throughout, because I've been blessed with a colleague with whom I could discuss all aspects of ministry, over the kitchen table, at church, wherever. And I think that my ministry has really benefited from that. And I think the multitude of my colleagues who don't have a partner who's also a minister, it's a shame, you know. I mean, they're missing out on something. And so the Worship Associates program, in a way, builds on that, does more of that. It works with that conversation as opportunity to deepen and broaden ministry as I see it. Yeah, it's one take on shared ministry, which again is a bigger and very worthwhile idea.
I would just say ditto, but I also like the fact that I think it's important in worship to try to keep in mind what's going on both in the larger world and certainly in the congregation. And I think oftentimes worship associates can have a different take on that and another perspective and even another awareness of things happening. And I think that's great to bring together. And I think collaboration is just super. And I would also say I want to give a brief shout out certainly to Ray, but also Camille and the music being the way that all comes together. I think with all of that collaboration that the whole is truly more than the sum of the parts. And I think that I really am excited about the worship associates. I mean, I think the program is just, I haven't seen it done so intensively and broadly, and I think it's terrific. So good work.
Okay, I'm going to work the back of the room a little bit.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Laura Nagel, and my question is about the strategic directions for the congregation and the church, and where you think that is, where the key issues are, and what you bring to those issues.
Well, I would say that we're getting a sense of what the strategic issues are. I think we have more to learn, and I think there's certainly more that we want to hear from all of you about what those would be. I think certainly all the incredible work you've put into an effort, great effort and energy and resources that you've put into creating this new space and being able to accommodate I think more people, but also programming in a different way. I think incorporating, being able to accommodate RE in a different way and at a different sort of visibility and level. And I think, again, with the longer term plan of the area over here at some point, I think all plays into that strategic plan. And I guess I've heard a little bit about outreach or those kind of things, but I continue to think if we do what we're doing well, I think more people may be attracted to it. But I think that's really the goal, is focusing on meeting the needs of those folks who are here and keeping in mind the needs of those folks out there. And again, I mean, you heard my sermon. You know, I do think there's folks out there that would truly just, it could be life-saving for them to be a part of us, and they could really benefit us as well. And if that's the focus, on simply making sure that we're reaching out and being visible, I think growth would likely come. But I think that's different than kind of focusing on, we need to be, you know, by next June we need to have 350 members or whatever, you know, which, you know, there's a place for that, but I don't think that's kind of not my vision. Yeah, and I think we really very much see ourselves as supporting the work of the congregation and helping support the desires of the congregation and helping try to discern the collective will and helping move those things forward. And again, we have more to learn about what that might be, and I would imagine maybe even some more process among you. I'm not sure you're all completely unified about your strategic directions. You might be, and I'm sure there's some commonalities, but I think there's, you know, kind of more discussions to be had there. But I think it's exciting. And our sense is, and the big reason why we were so thrilled to have this opportunity, I think, is that it feels like you guys have done so much work and that you really are sort of poised to move forward further into your vision, and that's really exciting. So, okay, did you want to add to that?
Ditto.
Hi, my name is Martha Deal. I'm very pleased to be meeting you and very pleased to have this opportunity. Question is, could you speak a little bit about your personal relationship with the natural world and how that informs your ministry?
Well, you have to know we're coming from East Central Illinois, agricultural environment, seas of grain, where as far as an island of town amidst cornfields and soybean fields. So the thought of coming here is a very positive one. On my days off in Urbana-Champaign, what I do is I drive half an hour to a state park that's a safe distance from, Urbana-Champaign, and have my little place where I go for the walk that I like to go on. And that's an important part of my filling my something. I'm inspired by authors that speak of religious ideas or notions of the sacred or the transcendent or the holy in terms of nature. When I was a teenager, I liked to go hiking with a buddy of mine. This was just as I was entering into the ministry. And we had some very powerful times there, going for long hikes. And it's funny, when I think back on when I look at my kids now, they're 18 and 20-year-olds, I think, kids, they're just playing computer games and, wasting their time with friends. But in unenlightened moments, I might think that. But when I think back when I was 18 and 20, it turns out that the time I was spending with friends, actually those walks I took, they continue to sustain me to this day, And, so, how about you?
I think Axel and I both have a great appreciation for the natural world, and I think it truly is sort of where I would put kind of my whole notions of spirit and something larger than myself. I feel that most clearly being out under a starry sky or walking in the woods. We have been living in the middle of corn and soybean fields, and it's been okay because we've been raising our kids and we've been working and we've been going to school and we've been doing a lot of stuff. But I think we do miss having more regular opportunities, and Axel does drive every Monday to Kickapoo State Park and go for his walk, and we'll go for walks. We live in a nice neighborhood with a lot of trees, so we go for walks. But certainly on our vacations, we like to go to places that are beautiful in nature. And it also was important. Axel jokes about our kids, but we were one of the few parents. I'm not bragging, just telling the truth. That I was a little unhappy with some of my kids' friends' parents, because our kids had a strict limit on their screen time. Our kids had 30 minutes a day, and we didn't have a TV, so they had 30 minutes a day, period, screen time for their whole growing up. And that was a great thing, because they did other stuff, and they did play outside, and they did go to the parks, and they did do a lot of other things, and we love our technology as much as anybody, but I think that was really important, especially at that age, because it's just so, they had friends that literally spent 8 hours, playing video games. And again, sorry, I hope I'm not offending anyone, but I thought it was a shame, because I thought those other kids were really missing out on some important stuff. So I think it's very important. The challenge is always, we're big fans of the Transcendentalists, our great historical forebears, and, Emerson, who basically said, forget church, go for a walk in the woods, and there's something to that, and so I won't be offended if anybody chooses to go do that on some Sundays, I think that there are ways that can feed your spirit, that coming together. No, don't do it every week.
Okay, working this side here.
Hi, I'm Karen too. And I wanted to tell you that we have had in the past, but another couple, ministerial couple, and they're famous, I think, Marge and Fred Kite. But that's been about 15 or 20 years now. And a lot of the congregation won't have that as their model, but some of us will. And I'm wondering if you could say a little bit more about how the partnership works. And we may be thinking we're getting 2 ministers. Wow, it's a lot of bang for the buck. But you've already described that it is, but could you tell us more about how that works?
How does it work? So we started it out, our co-ministry, well, nope, that's a lie. No? I was going to say we started our co-ministry when we had 2 young kids, but that's a lie. We started our co-ministry 5 years before we had our kids. But it was during the years that we had our young kids, I think that the co-ministry really worked best. And it's the time I often think back to because we always traded off. We had one full-time position, so one of us was always a minister or the other was the parent, and we'd go back and forth, one wearing the minister's hat and one wearing the parent hat. And tag team, exactly. That worked very well. So, at that time, on any given Sunday, one of us would be the minister and the other person would be the parent. One person would be in charge of leading worship, whether alone or with other lay people, and the swap accordingly. The week we'd break down. One day one person would be in the office, the next day the other person would be in the office, and so forth. We would share stuff like staff meetings and board meetings and board retreats. And I would imagine the pastoral care thing is something we might also want to share. Yeah, so it's a little tricky. It is a slippery slope for sure to do more than one full-time position for co-ministers. And so it'll be a challenge for us because I think we're both kind of, we would be very excited to do more, but we know it's not good for us, and we also know it's not good for the congregation. And ideally, who knows, maybe someday this congregation would want to have more than one full-time FTE minister, but 1.5 FTE. And then, of course, if we had been already providing 1.5 FTE for years without anybody noticing, that would make it difficult to sell that idea, of course. So yes, so we try to split everything down the middle, joining a couple of things along the way, and it's on us to be mindful of boundaries. Maybe Elaine can speak a little bit to communication in all of that.
So I think one of the keys, actually for just about anything, but especially for co-ministry, is communication. And that's on Axel and myself to make sure that we keep one another very informed about whatever's happening and going on. We tend to kind of divide up working with different committees from year to year, and often sometimes trading off to make sure that we're both staying in touch with different aspects of the congregation. But also sometimes there's the possibility of sticking with a committee that either that we're particularly drawn to or that seems to be working well, or if there's some other reason to do that. I think we really then model and embody kind of a collaborative shared ministry, which I think is a good thing. And we would, as I said before about the compensatory complementary stuff, I think we each need, whoever's in front of you can be your minister. If you have a particular desire to talk to the other one, for counseling or for some ceremony or whatever else, you're free to choose which of us you'd like to approach. But in general, whoever's in the office that day or whoever's, that you're at a committee meeting, whatever, that's your minister. And if there's something important that we need to share with one another about what happens, we do that. Oftentimes, if you come to us, though, and there's really something that you want to tell the other one, and it can, wait till the next time they're in the office, sometimes we'll say, you might really want to talk to Axel about that. Or he'll say, you might really want to talk to Elaine. But most of the time, we try to be fairly interchangeable. And again, we're different, but I think we're both capable of dealing with most issues. And again, we do all issues. Most issues, yeah. So, oh, it's so much easier. Yeah, so I think cell phones and email, while you need to keep up with email, that it makes things very much easier. And Axel and I tend to copy each other all the time on all kinds of things. So again, a lot of the burden of that is on us. So if there's something that someone would just emails to me and I think it's really important, you know, has to deal with the ministry of the congregation, and I think it's important Axel knows it, I'll either mention it to him or most likely forward it to him, or if I get a text, I could forward. I mean, you know, and again, you know, it helps. We live together and we talk about church, kind of. That's kind of mainly what we talk about. So this is probably more than you want to know, but well, co-ministers, we often talk about that kind of like the bedroom is like the no church discussion zone, you know, kind of, just so you can sleep and, you know, so you're not laying there discussing church work into the wee hours. So, but yeah, did that answer your question? I think.
I'm Kelly, and I just thought you were great today. I'm so sorry I'm going to miss Tuesday, but because my favorite thing is social justice, and I am senior advocate for women without adequate housing. And we're really getting someplace finally after 6 years. But I wanted to know, because the women's homeless has been such a hard way to go. We're not thought of very good, but my church and its directors have been absolutely unbelievably helpful. And I would like, because I missed Tuesday, I'm computer free. I don't own a computer free. And so maybe I could make an appointment sometime to talk. Yes,
I'm Olga Chandler, and I don't know how much you know about us, but we have basically been on a revolving door of people. We've had, you know, RE, runaway, minister after minister, and it's been a traumatic event. I just want to know, if you were to be chosen as ministers, if you have someone who's, you know, going to have an immediate grandchild, or if you have a family member who's ill, or anything that's going to make you pull up stakes and run away so that we have to go through this process again. Obviously, you know, life is unpredictable. It's all one giant game. But at the moment, how fully committed are you to staying right here, were you to be chosen as ministers?
Well, I would say, I think it's a fair question, and I would say barring unforeseen circumstances, which, as you acknowledge, we would hope to be here for a very long time. I think we've been almost 20 years in Champaign-Urbana, which is, on the one hand, it's the longest we've ever been anywhere, but it's been, it's been terrific, and I really appreciate all that we've been able to do and all the people we've been able to meet, and I think the difference we've been able to make in the community there because of being there for such a long time. And I think that's, again, also why we were looking to make a move now at this point in our lives. I mean, as Axel said, we've been doing this about 25 years, but we started pretty young, so retirement is long in the distance for us, and I think we're really looking for a place where we could be for a very long time. And I have family out here, which helps, and that's actually part of the reason that also made this additionally attractive, that my father lives in the South Bay area, and he's actually been considering house hunting with us and moving in with us, which would be, I think, a real benefit for us and for him. And my sister, my only sister, lives in Atascadero, just a little south of here, and she and her husband have a wine shop there, and they're very committed to that, and my nephew's out here. And so I think there are, and Axel's brother, who used to live in New York City, his only brother here in the United States, just moved to Portland, our family's going west, so it's, which is a good thing, and again, makes it more attractive for us. But our hope would be, I mean, this is, again, we did this whole candidating thing, you know, we did it 20 years ago, and we would hope to actually not ever have to do it again. No, it's been a fine thing. It's been a fine. What I mean is that we would be happy to stay somewhere and be happy somewhere for a very long time. So that would certainly be our goal. And I have my mother and stepfather live in Washington, D.C., and they're getting older, but I think I already knew that if anything were to happen to my stepfather, my mother would be out here near my sister. And so again, that would just, family-wise, and Axel's his mother's in Germany, so California. Actually, she's more excited to come visit us if we move here than she was to come to Illinois. So we're actually hoping we might get this will improve our family ties, actually, being out here, which would be a good thing. So, yeah. Ditto?
Olga kind of stole that question out of my brain. We kind of share one. So the other thing I wanted to know about is what your background is as far as the size of congregations you served before. Are they similar to this? We've got a congregation that's probably mid-sized, that's growing, and we just want to know how your experience blends with that.
So the Urbana congregation that I've been serving now for 19 years, the first 5 years with Elaine as a co-minister, the next 14 years on my own, has a membership, I think this year they reported, of 266 to the UUA or something like that, and their budget is just over 400,000 or something like that. Average Sunday attendance is in the neighborhood of 140 some to 150. Church school enrollment is about 100 kids, an average of 65 on a Sunday morning. So in many ways, it's very comparable, very similar to this congregation in size. And over the years that I've been there and over the years we've been there, we've worked steadily at sort of shoring up the institutional health and solidity of the congregation. So it's grown in finances, the staffing has expanded, going from a half-time DRE to a full-time DRE. Got a half-time membership coordinator hired, increased the administrator position from half-time to, all those good things, getting the board, helping the board work more as a board as opposed to a super committee in the congregation, to understand the board's distinct role in the governance of a congregation as a policy-setting body and concerned with the big picture and the long-range planning and leaving it to committees to do committee work and stuff like that, clarifying policy, coming up with job descriptions. All that good, wonderful institutional work that you're all so excited about, right? Because everybody loves committee meetings, right? Okay, good. So anyway, I think it's important. We believe in the democratic process, right? And we believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and we do want to create a place where people can be heard and be meaningfully involved. And the sad truth is, if you don't pay attention to institutional nuts and bolts, people just can't cooperate as nicely. People step on one another's toes. People are confused as to which direction we're trying to pull this thing. There's one story that put it so well in Urbana-Champaign, where it wasn't clear who was in charge of which part of the grounds, and so one woman very nicely mulched the little garden around the sign of the church. It says Unitarian Universalist Church of Urbana. Next day, somebody else came, threw out her mulch, and put in nice wood chips there because they didn't know that those were put there on purpose by someone, and it wasn't clear who was in charge. And the person who had done the first one, of course, was very unhappy, and so there it is, My colleague, wise minister, has a couple of things she asks me again and again throughout our ministry, and I've quoted this before, just yesterday, I think, to another group of people. Who gets to decide is one of those questions and so often it's unclear. And oftentimes when there's some problem, there's somebody upset about something happening in the church, some people not knowing what to do next, and we're running our heads against a wall, or then Elaine says, well, who gets to decide? Who? And more often than not, there's some confusion as to who gets to decide. Some people think they get to decide, other people think that person gets to decide. And if one can clarify that's great. And that might involve a conversation with many people. It might involve looking at the bylaws. It depends. So. That's maybe more than you wanted to hear for that one question. I'm sorry. But Elaine serves a different church in Decatur, and maybe she can say something about that.
So the first church we served was in Watertown, New York, for 6 years, 5 of them as co-ministers, and that was a church of about 100, and I think by the time we left it was about 120. And in that church, before we had kids and doing our co-ministry, we also did RE for part of the time, and we also did some of the administration. It was a small congregation, and so it was good, great experience. I think anyone, especially if you work with staff sometime, that everyone should have to do the job of that staff person at some point, because you really appreciate all that goes into it, and even what's helpful in that instance. And since coming back into the ministry, I have been serving the Decatur congregation, which is about 55 members. They have about 45 on a Sunday, and I'm the only paid staff other than they pay somebody to clean twice a month, and they have nursery care they pay. And that's, again, been very interesting, too. And, again, everything else is done by volunteers, which is incredible. I mean, it's an incredible group of people. And, again, I think that's really helped me appreciate all that they do. And I've tried to do a few more things than they had previous ministers do, just because I'm sitting there doing my office hours, ready to do something. And so I think it's, again, helpful, though, to have that perspective, because especially when it's a small congregation, there still are certain basic things that need to be done, you know, and it's a bigger congregation, you need to worry more about communication and, again, explicit policies and things that people can access information, but the same work is always necessary in a smaller congregation, and it's been good, too. But, yeah, and I've been very involved in the Urbana congregation, whether as co-minister or since the last 14 years, sort of behind the scenes, but yeah. Good.
Okay, we've been going for about 45 minutes now. We'll give it another 5 minutes, maybe a couple more questions. But before we take those last questions, I do want to acknowledge the work that Carol Collin did in getting this potluck organized. Thank you, Carol. Really, it was stellar. Well, that's true. Thank you, all of you who brought something to share. Thank you, all of you, for sharing yourselves by being here. So, a couple more questions. And I see Wanda's hand up.
Number one, did Axel and Elaine get to eat? Did you guys get to eat? Because it was a wonderful meal. It was sort of pandemonium. That was our inaugural use of that space. And it was wonderful.
It looked very nice. We saw many delectable plates walking past. We did see the beautiful cake with our names on it, and I fended for myself, and I went straight for the dessert. Dessert first is what I did. So then.
Well, I hope that afterward you can, if there's something left, so you can eat. We didn't want to starve you. Number two, the whole process, I don't know anything about it. I'm just curious. I presume you're still working back home. Do they know you're here?
Yes, they do. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. And so it is a tricky process, the search process. There is a good portion of it that happens kind of in secret and where confidentiality is very important. But once your search committee decided to offer us, or they invited us to be candidates, and we said, yes, super, that would be wonderful. That was sort of the to then go public, which we did 2 weeks ago, and Urbana's been busy trying to find now an interim minister, and they're doing good work. So.
Okay, Brenda, and then back to Sean.
Thank you. My name is Brenda Aronovitz, and I welcome you, and I'll be quick with my question. I'm interested to know, along with all the other things that people expect from ministers, what are your visions for doing involvement in the community in an interfaith setting or out in the greater public to get the name of Unitarian Universalists better known by our work and by our service?
I certainly would want to be involved in whatever type of kind of interfaith clergy groups there are. We spoke to John Burns, and he didn't seem to think there was a very strong network, but I'm sure it's out there. And I know that I do think, especially sort of more liberal-leaning clergy do need to stick together because, and so I've been involved in those groups throughout, and I would look forward to that. I also think, so I have a big interest in, well, many things in the community, but I have a big interest in education because I do think that that's where some of our greatest disparities lie in this country, and that also that children kind of have the most potential, and that if they get certain things as they're developing, that it's a lot less work to try to get adults to be aware of certain things, and if you can work with kids. And I've been on the school board in Urbana for the past 6 years. Actually just got reelected, but that's okay. It was good because I've actually been on the board negotiation team for negotiating the collective bargaining agreement with the teachers, which was a great experience. And I was just on it now for the second time. And just the other, well, I think the vote is coming up this week, but I believe that we got that resolved. So I'm very interested in education and certainly, again, any type of kind of social justice activities, which I know there's a lot, I think I would want to try to be involved in. And that's sort of what I do, like, in my free time. I mean, I would see it as a role of outreach of the congregation as well, but even at the times that I haven't been serving as a minister, I've been involved in the community. So, and Axel is involved too, though, again, with our division of labor, since that really feeds me as well. I think he's often happy to let me do the bulk of that, but he's usually, always supportive and present, and right? He does leave his study. He does leave his study too. So, but yeah, and again, we'd look forward to, I'm aware of some of the activities that your congregation has already been involved with, and I'd be interested in seeing what else is out there. So, thank you.
Okay, and now our last question from Sean.
Hello, I'm Sean Kraut. I was wondering if you could each say something about your theology, belief system, spiritual journey. I know that really requires much more time, but if it's possible, if you could say something about that.
That's an easy question. So I think if I think about the trajectory of my own religious journey, I think that I have worked my way further and further into, when I was a kid, it didn't make a lot of sense to me, and I didn't see the value in it, with the religion thing. The more I've been at it, the more I've come to appreciate it. And I think the more comfortable I've gotten with religious language, and the idea of God, using the word God, which I use cautiously in Unitarian Universalist circles, because at least the congregation I've been serving for the past 19 years, we're broken down pretty much evenly in a third atheist, a third agnostic, and a third theist. So I guess I've learned to choose my language carefully in which to talk about these things. And I think being very thoughtful about the language one uses is a good thing, because different words mean different things for different people. And with any luck, these are powerful words. Certainly we want to use words powerfully, and thus we need to do it carefully and respectfully, wearing crash helmets perhaps if we're wise. I'm sorry? Yes, theology. No, it's a perpetual struggle and process for sure to find words that make sense and that are meaningful. And one of the reasons that I find the ministry very worthwhile, and part of the reason that I think that the religious enterprise and religious community is worthwhile, is because the same words don't make sense today. The words that made sense last week won't make sense the same way today. given who we are, what's happened in our lives, what's happened in the world, the way these words have been used by other people in other contexts, their meaning change for all of us. And so it's a perpetual challenge to find ways to talk about these things in a way that makes sense, you know, that touches into meaning, that brings people together, you know, that can cast a tangible vision of hope, you know, that's transformative, you know, that can make a difference. And yeah, you just have to keep at it. And with any luck, the words will change.
Briefly, I'd just say I am a Unitarian Universalist through and through, and that's my theology, and I'm very able to interpret religious language or other traditions. And I think, to me, it didn't make sense that we should all have one way of believing or one way of practicing our belief. We don't all have one, again, cultural norm. We don't all have one way of eating or dressing or speaking a language, and I think there are many paths up the mountain, and I think Unitarian Universalists, we treasure a great respect for other people's ways that they found meaning and make sense of the world. And I think we're so fortunate as Unitarian Universalists to be able to draw on so many sources and so many sources of inspiration and stories and traditions and rituals, respectfully, and being aware and cautious about misappropriation and trying to, but nevertheless craft our own meaning. And yeah, and I really like hearing about other people's spiritual journeys as well. And I often find out there's a lot of similarity there in how people, whether they, when they come to Unitarian Universalism, young or old or whatever has led them, there's often a lot of commonality. And I think we really grow and learn from one another in doing that. And that, again, enriches my own faith. So, yeah.
Well, I'm sure you want to join me in thanking Axel and Elaine. Thank you so much. And please look for other opportunities to get to talk with them, to hear their ideas as they meet with various committees and groups that are active within the church. That will take place this week, every day. There's something scheduled. And it would be a wonderful chance for you in a smaller group to engage in conversation with them and learn more about them and have them learn more about us in the process. So thank you all very much for today, for being here, and especially those. You're welcome. And if you brought something to share, you might check to see if there's anything left. In any case, we don't have a kitchen in which to deposit leftovers, so I hope they all disappear.